Hey everyone, welcome to BSR Sports Talk on BostonSportsRadio.net. I'm Ashish Sharma with Brian Roach, and today we'll be talking about the AFC Championship game. The Patriots beat the Houston Texans in last Sunday's Divisional Round 41 to 28, and now it's going to be a rematch of last year's AFC Championship game with Baltimore coming to town. It's also the seventh time that the combo of Brady and Belichick has gone to the AFC title game, the battle for rights to go to the Super Bowl. Now, it obviously wasn't as impressive as the 42-14 spanking that we saw in Monday Night Football, but this win against the Houston Texans at home was still pretty impressive, Brian, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it was all around impressive. I mean, sure they gave up two more touchdowns, but it wasn't really a close game. The Patriots put it away with some field goals, some nice plays put together, some nice special teams plays and stuff like that. So overall, it was a very complete win.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, no win is without certain injuries at times, and obviously two very big ones on Sunday. Luckily, Danny Woodhead, who got hurt on the first offensive play, he hurt his thumb. He's not expected to miss much time. He should be back next week against Baltimore in the AFC Championship game. But Rob Gronkowski re-broke his surgically repaired forearm, and now he's going to miss the rest of the playoffs. How's that going to impact the Patriots?
Well, the thing is, it's a different part of his arm that he broke. So it's kind of like a different injury, but so it's going to take more time to heal than if he re-broke the same part of his arm. But I mean, it shouldn't be too much. I mean, the first time these teams met earlier in Week 3, where they lost by 3 points, he only had two catches for 21 yards, so he wasn't even really a factor. So maybe it won't even affect the outcome, really. I mean, sure, it affects the Aaron Hernandez, Rob Gronkowski duo, but overall, I think it should be fine without Gronkowski.
Right, I agree. I think this team offensively has enough depth, even without Rob Gronkowski. Look, they've been dealing with injuries throughout the year offensively. They lost Aaron Hernandez week 2 against the Cardinals, and then they obviously lost Rob Gronkowski for a good portion of the season. Julian Edelman went on injured reserve. Brandon Bolden got suspended. So they have still found ways to be the big offensive juggernaut that they have been this season. And despite Rob Gronkowski not being a factor in this week's game, Tom Brady was still fine. He was 25 for 40, 344 yards with 3 touchdowns, and he connected with 5 different receivers. Wes Welker, 8 receptions, 131 yards. Aaron Hernandez, 6 receptions, 85 yards. So obviously losing Gronkowski is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think they like you said, they're still going to be fine. They can still find ways to put points up on the board.
Yeah, I mean, when Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, and Julian Edelman were all out, that he was able to find Brandon Lloyd for those 2 games, and Lloyd had those incredible catches on the sideline. I think he can do that against the secondary of the Ravens, because the secondary of the Ravens I don't think is that good. I mean, Peyton Manning was able to tear them up a little bit um, in the loss last weekend. So, I mean, overall, I think Brady will be able to pinpoint the weak points. So.
Sure, yeah, I think so, and obviously a lot of big days for a lot of different players. Shane Vereen with a coming out party for him, 124 all-purpose yards, 3 touchdowns, including one fantastic one down the left sideline, kind of reminiscent to the one that Welker had earlier in the game. Don't really think of these small guys as deep threats, but I think Shane Vereen out of the backfield is providing a new kind of threat for a receiving running back. Obviously, something that we haven't seen much of with Stephen Ridley. But Shane Vereen has really stepped up as of late.
Yeah, he's like a Woodhead number 2, basically, because they usually bring Woodhead in that package where they set it up to be a run, but then they throw it short yardage to Danny Woodhead to gain the first down. They can do that with Vereen. He had some trouble with it early on to catch the ball. At least he had some drop passes, but I mean, they don't look at Ridley that much. They use him as a down the middle back, and he's actually really good at that. He had some nice runs in the last game. So.
And speaking of Danny Woodhead, it's kind of funny. We've said this in the past, but he's sort of the elder statesman of all the guys in the running back core. I mean, you look at Woodhead and Ridley and Shane Vereen. These were all young guys. The days of old where they had Sammy Morris and Fred Jackson or Corey Dillon with Lawrence Maroney, those days are over. We're talking about a very young core here. And I think this is a core that can be good for a very long time, considering that they stay under contract. And you got to feel good about the versatility that you have with Woodhead, with Ridley, with Vereen in terms of running the ball, running screens, getting out in the flat. So obviously, you're going up against a tough defense next week with the Baltimore Ravens. But if all these guys can stay healthy, Brady's got some options out of the backfield.
Yeah, I mean Ridley's probably still the number one, but the other, I know Bill Belichick doesn't like to stick with one running back, as you saw all season. Sometimes he'd take Ridley out when he was on a hot streak, even if he was on a hot streak and they were near the 20-yard line, they put in Woodhead, maybe after a timeout they put in Shane Vereen, and he'd get the touchdown even though Ridley did all the work. It was very frustrating for fantasy owners, but it wasn't as frustrating for the Patriots. So.
Right, and Brian, I do want to give you credit. I think last week you said that Arian Foster you expected to have about 90 yards on the ground. He had exactly 90 yards on 22 carries with a touchdown. So yeah, good job there. I didn't think that he was going to be as contained. I thought he'd bust out for more than 100 yards, but I think obviously the Patriots have one of the better run defenses in the league, and to contain Arian Foster, and he obviously still had a big day, 90 yards. That's still not shabby at all. But they held him to 22 carries, 90 yards, 1 touchdown. And again, Rob Ninkovich, I don't know how many times we can talk about this guy, but he has just been phenomenal all year. We didn't know the extent of his hip injury in the season finale. He came back. What a game for him. He picked off Matt Schaub, and then he had a huge recovery on the onside. Late in the game, that onside kick by Houston, if they recovered that, you still have the ball game. I mean, they still had, I think, 4 minutes left on the clock.
Yeah, it was a very. It looked like the Texans were going to recover it, because it had that half bounce that they talked about it, comparing it for an infielder, and the Patriots player totally botched it. It went away from him, and then Ninkovich came out of nowhere, basically, it looked like, and just dived upon it. And he had that interception too, which didn't hurt, because when he intercepted it, the Patriots marched down the field and scored a touchdown. So.
Yeah, I was a little surprised on the interception. It almost seemed like Matt Schaub didn't pick him up at all. He threw it right at him, and I remember, I think it was Phil Simms said that it looked like Matt Schaub saw him but didn't anticipate him. But from when I saw the replays, it looked like he didn't know he was there at all. He threw it right at Rob Ninkovich. So obviously, Ninkovich has the ability to make plays on the ball. He's oftentimes in the right place at the right time, and that's fantastic. I love players like that. And I think he's going to be huge in the AFC Championship game, hopefully in the Super Bowl if they get that far, knock on wood. But he's a guy that I just love having. I do want to talk again about the special teams. A lot of special teams breakdowns, especially on that first kick return on the opening kickoff. Danielle Manning took it back, what was it, 90 yards, 94 yards on the opening kickoff? And that's really surprising considering the Patriots were the number 3 kick return coverage team in 2012. And they allowed Danielle Manning on 4 kick returns to have 54 yards on average on returns. So obviously Matthew Slater, the special teams captain, was not happy about this after the game. He was very short and brief with his answers with reporters after the game, and you could tell that he thought that they needed to improve in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, usually they don't give up. But I think they've given up 1 or 2 of them over the last 2 or 3 games. I don't see it hurting them. I mean, Jacoby Jones is really good, but I think Gostowski is a very good kickoff guy, especially he usually puts it in the end zone for a touchback so that they don't even have a chance. And I think the same with Mesko, Zoltan Mesko. He's able to put the punt within very good range of the end zone. So.
Right, and I think Gostowski, speaking of him, I think he might be the best tackling kicker I've ever seen. He horse-collared a guy last week, but in general, he seems to be the last line of defense, and in general, he's not bad. But, yeah, that is one matchup. Yeah, that's actually one matchup that I do fear is Jacoby Jones, the all-pro kick returner. In 2012, he had over 1,000 yards on kick returns. He had 38 returns for 1,167 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then an additional 341 yards on punts with 1 touchdown. So obviously, normally I wouldn't get too worked up over that. I mean, yes, the Baltimore Ravens are the best kick return team in the NFL. They were in 2012. But the Patriots are the number 3 team at kick coverage. I mean, they only allowed 20.5 yards per return, and a lot of that had to do with Steven Gostowski getting it in the end zone and forcing the touchback. But if we see what we did this past game with Danielle Manning getting so many yards, again, 4 kick returns for an average of 54 yards, that's not going to fly. That's not going to work against a team like Baltimore. That's the best in that regard.
Yeah, especially since they're like their offense is a short field offense. I don't think they can sustain a huge 90 or 80 to 90 yard drive and be able to score a touchdown because they do have those deep threats, but they mainly rely on Ray Rice and some short passes to Dennis Pitta and maybe Anquan Bolden. But
Well, let's switch gears now. I want to talk about the other game, the other AFC game, which was Baltimore at Denver. Brian, probably one of the most memorable finishes that I can remember in a long time. I mean, I'm talking about a team that I'm watching this game. I'm thinking to myself, this is Ray Lewis's final. This is the last time we're going to see him in uniform. 30 seconds left, no timeouts. Baltimore was at their own 30-yard line.
Yep.
The last thing I would expect is a deep 70-yard touchdown bomb from Flacco to Jacoby Jones in double coverage. That's exactly what happened, and they forced overtime. Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it was botched coverage by the Denver Broncos, and it really, I've never seen Flacco throw something like that. I mean, it's time to put him in a category because he's made the playoffs every single year. He's been able to win games here and there. Has been able to get to that Super Bowl. He's almost to that hump. But I mean, he has the threats. He has Torrey Smith. He has Anquan Bolden. He has Ray Rice out of the backfield. Remember that? What was it? 3rd and 28 was it 3rd and 28? Or 3rd and 38, something like that, where Ray Rice, he dropped it off to Ray Rice and he ran for the first down late in the season to lock up the 4th seed, basically.
Yeah, the thing with Joe Flacco is I think he has the potential to be elite, but yet as looking at sports writers and analysts, I think they are a little hesitant to put him in the company of Tom Brady and Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning and Eli Manning. They don't want to do it just yet because he's not consistent enough. He hasn't done he doesn't have as big a body of work as the rest of them. Yeah, he's gotten into the playoffs every year as a starter, but I think a lot of that you can attribute to the Ravens defense, and a lot of it you can attribute to the superstar running back that they have, Ray Rice. But I think Joe Flacco is right, maybe 1 or 2 notches below them. He just has to be more consistent, and he has to be, again, he has to put up bigger numbers on a weekly basis. But I thought that was one of the most fantastic plays I've ever seen, forcing double overtime in a playoff game on the road, okay, and pulling out that win. And Peyton Manning, somehow, he started off the game pretty well, but somehow, late in games, he turns into Tony Romo, especially in the playoffs. A regular season is a different story. He's a great regular season quarterback, but why do you think that in the playoffs in his career, he just hasn't been able to get it done in big moments?
I don't know. I think it's maybe mentally something, but I mean, maybe it had to do with the cold. He's 0-4 in 40 degrees or below. So, I mean, maybe the coldness has a factor to it. I think was he wearing gloves?
Yeah, he was wearing gloves with both hands.
He was wearing gloves. He was wearing gloves. So, I mean, maybe that wasn't much of a factor, but maybe when it started, the wind numbing him and the adrenaline running off a little bit. So.
Yeah, I remember. I forget who was announcing for this game. I think it was Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. But they were talking about how Peyton Manning, in terms of preparation for cold games, he dips his hand into ice water, and that's how and then he throws the ball. And that's so obviously I think he was prepared in terms of that. Like you mentioned, he was wearing gloves, and he went through his pregame routine. But it just seems like in the playoffs, his mindset is just that he can't get it done in those close moments. And I think part of it might have been a little bit of shock on his part, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is going into overtime. It seemed like that one was locked up. 30 seconds left, up a touchdown. you're not expecting that to go. And I was a little surprised. I can't remember if they had 3 timeouts or 2 timeouts. The
They
Colts
had two. They had two.
they had
They
two
had two timeouts. The
decided to take
Broncos,
a
yeah.
knee. Yeah, they decided to take a knee and go into overtime. I was a little surprised by that, to be honest. I thought, you have 2 timeouts, 27 seconds, maybe, run 2, 3 quick plays, call a timeout, get in the field goal range, and try at least attempt a game-winning field goal with Prater. Just
With
never
one
happened.
of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, and they didn't even try it. So
I was a little bit surprised by that. I think usually the offensive coordinator has something to do with it, but I think in that situation, John Fox had the call, and he just decided to take the knee. A little bit surprising. Now, let's obviously we've talked about Jacoby Jones. Anquan Bolden had a fantastic game the week before that. A little quiet in the Denver game, but the week before that he was big. Torrey Smith has been fantastic. Really flying under the radar. He had 98 yards and 2 touchdowns and some fantastic catches, and he just basically burned Champ Bailey all day in that game. Just made him look old.
yeah, I mean, he only had 3 catches in the game, but he averaged almost over 30 yards per catch. So I mean, you're seeing like deep down the field threats. He's able to. He has great hands, and he's able to run past the corners. Even one that's really good, such as Champ Bailey. I mean, we'll see how he does against Aqib Talib, which I'm betting Belichick's going to put on Torrey Smith, not Bolden. So
Right. Yeah. For some reason, I thought Aqib Talib would be on Torrey Smith as well. And the last time these two teams met, remember, Torrey Smith had a fantastic game. It was obviously just a day after he learned that his brother was killed, and it was obviously a very emotional game for him. And he had something like, was it 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns? I don't have that stat in front of me, but he had one of the games of his career on Sunday Night Football against the Patriots, which we'll talk about later on the show. But I do have my eye on Torrey Smith. I think he's a huge X factor. A lot of people look at, Ray Rice and Anquan Bolden and things like that. But I think Torrey Smith is going to be huge. And I think Dennis Pitta, their tight end, also doesn't get enough credit. He does a very good job for them.
he had a touchdown against the Patriots that game too.
Yeah,
Late
so
one, yeah.
you've got to watch Pitta as well. And obviously, finally, Ray Rice. He had 131 yards, 1 touchdown. Kind of weird. No receptions out of the backfield. He's one of the better receiving running backs. Still had a big game, but I thought that was a little weird.
Well, I think what the new offensive coordinator is trying to do is just try to have him be a running back. I mean, yes, he can catch it for short dump offs and stuff like that, but he had 30 carries, so they really wanted to use him as a back instead of like maybe run it, maybe catch it, sort of guy.
Their offensive coordinator, Cam Cameron, got fired. Right now it's Jim Caldwell, right?
Yep, Jim Caldwell. Yeah, he calls it from the booth. So
So I mean, there you have it. I mean, probably one of the most fantastic playoff games I've ever seen. I really hate to play that game of, picking one and saying this is the greatest I've ever seen, because I've seen so many. It's really hard to choose. I mean, you could go back to last year's NFC Divisional Round with San Francisco and New Orleans, where the lead changed 3 times in the final 4 minutes or something like that. But this
that was good. Yeah.
this truly was maybe. If someone put a gun to my head and said pick one, I'd say maybe this is probably the greatest playoff game I've ever seen. Double overtime. I didn't even think that was going to get into overtime. That game was over. So there you have it. The Ray Lewis farewell tour continues. I love Ray Lewis as a player, but I really hope that it ends next Sunday against the Patriots, because the Pats are hopefully going to the Super Bowl to face either San Francisco or Atlanta.
What'd you think of his post game speech?
I thought it was, they were talking about this on WEI. You know what? Leave the Lord out of it. I always say this to people when they say, what, God had a hand in this win. Honestly, if God is determining who wins and loses football games, then there's something seriously wrong with the world. I mean, there's so many other things happening in the world. I think he's got his hands full. I'm personally not a religious person, so it doesn't bother me too much. But I don't believe in this, predestined stuff. So I think Ray Lewis maybe got a little carried away with his comments. So, but a lot of these guys, Tim Tebow's another guy that oftentimes credits, the Lord and things like that. And I just don't understand it. I really don't. What, did you pray harder than the other guy? I don't get it at all. So obviously, it just seems like he got a little carried away there. But in addition to these AFC games, I think last week's AFC Divisional Round and NFC Divisional Round, it was much better than Wild Card Weekend, which in my opinion sucked. We had some good NFC games. The Seattle-Atlanta game was obviously a good one. San Francisco and Green Bay, a little bit of a blowout, but a very enjoyable one considering Colin Kaepernick. Let's talk about these two games. Well, let's start with Seattle and Atlanta. What do you think of this one?
Oh my gosh, they were down at Seahawks. It surprised me how well they did in the second half after what happened in the first half. Everything that went wrong could go wrong. They went for it on 4th and 1 near the end zone. It was like the 11-yard line, something like that. And they didn't use Marshawn Lynch as a running back, and they failed to get it. Instead of kicking the field goal, they lost by 2 points. That could have been the difference of the game. And then at the end of the first half, Russell Wilson got sacked with like 15 seconds to go, and he was trying to hurry it up, but he failed to call a play before the clock ran out, and they were down 20-0. And then they came back and were up 28-27. On a last second a touchdown with 30 seconds left by Marshawn Lynch. So you thought the game was in the Seahawks' hands, but no, Matt Ryan threw 2 great passes in a row, one to Tony Gonzalez at the 31-yard line. Matt Bryant lined up for the field goal. Pete Carroll calls a timeout, and he misses the first field goal.
Yeah. There you go.
And then he nails the second one. And that was the game. So
yeah, that actually brought up the great debate. Does icing the kicker really work? I mean, in essence, what you're doing is basically giving him a practice field goal.
Well, the plan is you have to call it before the ball is snapped, not as the ball snapped.
Right, but the thing is, kickers will still follow through with it. The timeout's called. They're still going to snap it and kick it. I mean, you're getting a free field goal. You're getting a free attempt. Why not? So then you can kind of make adjustments and say, oh, wow, kind of shanked that one. Probably should, do this. So, that was pretty interesting. But my thoughts on that game was obviously a very entertaining game. I'm a huge fan of Russell Wilson. I think he's very underrated considering all the rookie quarterbacks with, RG3 and Andrew Luck. But, in a sense, I'm also happy for a couple guys. I'm happy for Matt Ryan finally getting the playoff, monkey off his back. He finally won in the playoffs. He was, again, I hate to keep ragging on Tony Romo here, but again, he was sort of turning into the Tony Romo in the playoffs as well, not getting a win. And I think I was especially happy for Tony Gonzalez, obviously one of the greatest tight ends to ever play this game. 16, 17-year career, never won a playoff game. And finally did it. Finally got into the playoffs and won a game. So very happy for him.
200 straight games with a catch. So.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, he's one of the all-time greats. So, obviously thought that was great for him. And now they're headed to the NFC Championship game to face the San Francisco 49ers, who absolutely demolished Green Bay at Candlestick. What did you think of that one?
I think Kaepernick and Kaepernicking will be the new trend going forward because he had 183 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns, both to Michael Crabtree. Michael Crabtree is a beast. He's a huge wide receiver. I knew he was going to eventually break out, and Kaepernick instead of Alex Smith is the way to go for San Francisco.
Yeah, no, I remember we were talking about this about 4 weeks ago about Jim Harbaugh's decision to go with Colin Kaepernick over Alex Smith. I think now we understand why. Kaepernick is just so versatile. He can run, he can throw, he makes decisions well. He's got a strong arm, very athletic. Alex Smith kind of hit a ceiling, with his potential. I don't know where Kaepernick's ends. I mean, we've only seen this guy for about half a season, and he's blown me away so far. I mean, if this was, it's his second year, but if he was a rookie, I think you'd have to make serious consideration for him for Rookie of the Year if this was his first year. So I didn't expect it to be such a blowout. I mean, Green Bay was playing well down the stretch once they finally got fully healthy. But, yeah, San Francisco pretty much just toyed with them. And it's going to be a good game for San Francisco going into Atlanta. And I think they're going to beat Atlanta at their own stadium. So it should be a good one. But like I said, about 3 weeks ago, I still think it's going to be a Patriots-Niners Super Bowl. So.
Yeah, I think that too. So
now let's get back to the Pats a little bit. Obviously, the Patriots and the Ravens now going at it in the AFC Championship game back-to-back years. Last year, the Patriots got sort of lucky there at the end. Lee Evans had that ball. Sterling Moore kind of shoved his hand in there and knocked it away. We all know what happened with Billy Cundiff there at the end, just kind of missed the field goal, and the Patriots were the Super Bowl. I think you're going to see another very close game between these two teams, and the reason I say that is since 2007, the Patriots are 4-2 against Baltimore, but their average margin of victory in those 4 wins, 3.75 points. That's it. That's the lowest against any opponent in that span, minimum 2 games. So, obviously, I think this is going to be another really close one.
Yeah, I mean, I think both teams know each other very well. Both know each other's offenses and defenses, and that's why I think Jacoby Jones won't have big runs for kickoff returns because the Patriots know how to deal with him. They won't give him any opportunities to run it out of there and score or anything like that. So, I mean, Joe Flacco might have a hard time. I think he might have a hard time against this the defensive line, and the offensive line of the Patriots is very solid. I don't see Tom Brady getting sacked too much. I mean, he only got sacked once last week, so.
Yeah, no, and speaking of Tom Brady, in his career against Baltimore, he's 5-2, pretty decent record, but he has a career completion percentage against Baltimore of 58.9. That's the 3rd worst against any opponent in his career. Also, his passer rating in his career against Baltimore, 83, 4th worst against any opponent in his career. So that's a pretty telling stat that Tom Brady, despite being successful, ultimately wins and losses 5-2 against Baltimore. He has, I think, a harder time against the Ravens than anybody consistently over his career because they're such a smash-mouth defense. They got guys like Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs, guys like Ed Reed in the secondary. So this is going to be a close game, and I don't think it's going to be a very glamorous game for Brady. In the past, he has gotten wins, but it's always been one of those, grinded-out style wins for Brady, and not a very flashy offensive game for anybody, for that matter.
Yeah, I think it's going to be comes down to the kickers again. So hopefully it's Justin Tucker shanking a field goal and not Gostowski. So.
Right, yeah, no, it's interesting you bring that up because these two teams met this year in 2012, Week 3, Sunday Night Football, and again, a very close game. The Ravens won by a point on a last-minute game-winning field goal. Very controversial. You remember what happened, right? It went over that right upright, and it almost looked like it was not good. And you were mentioning before the show that someone actually videotaped that from behind the goalpost, and from that angle, it looked like it wasn't good, and it wasn't reviewable.
Yeah, it's not reviewable because since it says the uprights go on forever, so it's it goes by the call on the field since it wasn't in between the 2 uprights.
Right. No, just a very heartbreaking way to lose. Obviously, the Patriots' biggest concern early on this year, in which they've actually kind of straightened out now, has been closing out teams. We talked about how they can win the blowouts. They have no problem winning blowouts. But when it comes down to close games, can they hold other offenses defensively, and can they move the chains when they have to run out the clock offensively? And early on, the answer was no, because they had the lead on the Ravens in that game. All they needed was, I think, another first down, and they would have been able to run out the clock, and they couldn't get that first down. The ball went back to Joe Flacco on the offense, and the rest is history. They won by a point on the game-winning field goal, albeit it was a very controversial one. But so there you go. This is a very, very, tough rivalry that you have here, obviously, between these two teams. And I don't know what kind of defense we're going to see from the Ravens. Obviously, it hasn't been the same kind of defense as of late. Ray Lewis is not 100%. Ed Reed is getting older. They are transitioning more into an offensive threat than they are over the last, part of the decade have been more of a defensive team.
Yeah, I mean, Ray Lewis isn't 100%. I believe that it all comes down to Ray Rice because he's what Jim Caldwell has done has released him. Cam Cameron would use him he would get 15 carries a game, 20 carries a game. And you see what Jim Caldwell did last week, 30. So you should see him get 25 to 30 and Flacco gets 30, 35 passes. So it's kind of a more balanced offense. So Right.
And obviously the Ravens are very excited to be facing the Patriots next week in the AFC Championship game. There was a little bit of trash talk early on, right after the Patriots beat the Texans. Brendan Ayon, I can't even pronounce this guy's name because I've probably never heard of him, but Brendan Ayon Badejo, or Dejo, I believe he's a linebacker. I know he's a defensive player for the Ravens, but
He had no stats last week,
yeah, he
so
had
I
some things
mean,
to
I don't
say
know why
about.
he's talking, but
Yeah, he had some interesting things to say about the Patriots. He criticized the hurry up offense on Twitter, and I don't know who it was, but I'm sure it was a coach that forced him to apologize on Twitter publicly, and he did that. So that was kind of funny. He said, "I apologize for any comments I may have made." But yeah, probably not the smartest thing to say. Not a smart thing to poke the bear in the Patriots that'll just use that as bulletin board material for a team that's coming on into their Gillette, their own story. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
yeah, I mean, there was some trash talking by the columnists here. You know, Dan Shaughnessy,
Yeah.
he wrote a controversial article about the Texans, and Arian Foster used it as his Twitter like picture. Um, so, I mean, people thought the Texans would use that as fuel, but nothing happened. I mean, they started off well. They had a 3-0 lead, but
And I think it could have been. I mean, they could have set the tone early. I think going back to that first kickoff with Danielle Manning taking it back 94 yards, they had opportunities to score a touchdown there, and the red zone woes continued for them. They had to settle for a field goal, and that just made Devin McCourty's hustle play that much bigger. Because McCourty at that point, it almost seems fruitless in terms of tackling a guy. Oh, they're going to get the touchdown anyways. But the football mentality is you never know. You never know. They could, botch the snap. They could throw an interception, and in that case, they didn't get the touchdown.
have some drop passes.
Yep. So there you go. I think it was pregame jitters because I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Owen Daniels, but their other tight end that had it and just dropped it. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But going back to Brandon Ayendabadejo or whatever his name is, can't even say it. I think I can say Hamanamui, but I can't say this guy's name. But yeah, so obviously not the smartest thing to do. I mean, I know Belichick, I know Brady. They're going to use this. They'll say all the right things to the media, like, "Oh, we haven't heard about the tweet," or "That's not important to us." They're going to use that as bulletin board material, and they're going to come out
Yeah.
as motivation as ever to prove that they're wrong.
Yeah, I can see them. They'll use it. So
They will. Now, Brian, before we sign off, I need a prediction from you. I got 24-21 Pats. Like I've said, this is going to be a close game as all of them have been. It seems like every time these two teams meet, it's always, a fight down to the bitter end, in the final seconds. I think the Pats are going to win at home 24-21 on their way to Super Bowl 47 to face the Niners. What do you got?
I say 31-21 Pats. I say they cover the spread. So
Well, there you go. Hey, for everyone, he's Brian Roach. I'm Aashish Sharma, and that was BSR Sports Talk. Go Pats, and hopefully we'll be talking to you about the win against Baltimore next week. Thanks for watching.